Winnie M Li, welcome to the Conversation Coffee Break.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nadine.
You're welcome. Right, I have a copy of your book. There we go.
Nice.
What We Left Unsaid. So would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about your book, What We Left Unsaid?
Sure. So it is, I always picture it as kind of like a road trip story about three estranged adult siblings who are forced to go on a road trip together down Route 66 to see their ailing mother in California. So it's three estranged adult siblings who are Asian American or Taiwanese American. And so that's the kind of the additional layer of traveling through America, which is kind of a divided country, as we can see. And just kind of after kind of years of not speaking to each other really, or not really kind of interacting, they're kind of forced to spend like 6 days together, where they're crossing kind of, I suppose you can say, red states or parts of the country that they don't know. And they end up kind of confronting things that happened in their past and confronting different resentments that they had as siblings, but then also kind of learning more about each other, but learning about their own, about America at the same time. So yeah, there's a mystery that's folded in as well. So it's basically something happened to the family when there was a road trip 30 years ago, which made them turn around and not go to the Grand Canyon. So their mother basically says, I want you to go to the Grand Canyon in person as adults. And so during the present day trip, they kind of figure out what happened in the previous trip. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've got 2 questions, right? It's not even on the list that I gave you. I knew this would happen. Have you ever done a road trip yourself across the state?
Yeah.
You did. How did you find it?
Well, I know one of your questions is like, how do you come up with the concept? So I came up with the idea for the book because I wanted to do a road trip partly. So it was almost like kind of reverse in that, like, you know, I finished writing my second book, Complicit, and then it was COVID. I had a child, and then it was COVID. So suddenly I wasn't able to write or travel. Well, I wasn't able to travel, certainly. And I've traveled a lot my whole life. And so I kind of always, travel was really important to me. So I just started thinking like, oh, there's like a whole new existence I have. And I kind of realized like, how can I travel when I've got a kid now? And I realized, oh, you can actually drive by car and stuff. And it was also COVID. So because I'm American, I can go to the States. I could go to the States at the time. I don't remember there was like a sort of a travel ban and only American citizens could go to the US. So I just thought like, okay, actually, if I come up with an idea for a novel, which is about a road trip, then I have an excuse to do that road trip.
Yeah.
So it was sort of hand in hand that like the idea came up with the idea for the novel was birthed out of wanting to do a road trip myself. So all that stuff about family and finding your roots, like maybe sort of subconsciously was there for me as a new mother. Also was an American who was like kind of cut off from my country during COVID. So a lot of it kind of was that. So I ended up doing the road trip in autumn of 2021 with my partner, my English partner, and at the time he was like 22 months old, so he was 1 year old still. He was
a baby.
So, yeah. So we flew to Chicago. We rented a car and drove for 3 weeks down Route 66.
Oh, and you know, so when so you wanted to do the road trip, and you're like, well, how can I create a story out of this road trip? So where did your characters come from? Like, when did they appear to you?
Well, so I just started thinking about road trips in general, right? So like obviously months before I did it, like, so I was probably thinking about the idea for a good like at least 6 months, more than that, like sort of like 6 or 8 months before we actually did the road trip. I was thinking about, oh, okay, like let's think about road trips. And I think it's, again, for me as an American who's lived most of my entire adult life outside of the US, there's this thing about US road trips where you feel like it's like this like essential American experience, right? And you know, we see the movies and you know, there's like On the Road and all these books about road trips. So this notion of like, this is your country, this is America, like take to the open road and explore it is something that's like, I know, kind of baked into the American imagination. So even though I've lived on the coast, I've lived on the East Coast, my family lives in California now, I moved to Europe, or the UK, which I guess is not Europe anymore, technically, or whatever you want to say that. But like, so I've never actually done that American road trip, and that whole part of the US, like the whole western half, I didn't really know. So there's a sense of wanting to explore part of a country that was my country, but didn't feel like my country. And then I started thinking about like, because road trips as a narrative are quite an interesting form, right? And we can all probably name movies and books that are road trip inspired. So I started thinking, how can I do something that's new? And for me, it was that kind of estranged adult siblings kind of concept of like, okay, let's take three siblings who haven't spoken in a while. And obviously, you know, again, I'm Asian American myself, and most of my main characters are always going to be Asian American because it's important to have that representation
No, it is.
in literature. Yeah, so I started thinking about like three Asian American siblings who had taken very different paths in life, and different paths to negotiate around their own identity, and how they would then kind of be forced to drive this road trip together. So I think I came up with the road trip and they came up with the three characters, but they had to be siblings and they had to have like differing kind of political and financial views and be coming from different positions in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next question is, which character surprised you the most whilst writing? So you got the three siblings, Alex, Bonnie, and Kevin. So which of the three?
Yeah, so probably Kevin surprised me the most. So it's Bonnie's the eldest daughter, and she's she's the eldest daughter who's done everything correctly, right? So she's had the perfect life. You know, like was a high flying, corporate consultant, married like a well off white guy, and has like three sons. And so she's moved to Boston, and feels quite in some ways like very comfortable lifestyle, but like quite cut off from her own heritage. Kevin's the middle son who lives in Chicago, and his marriage is not in a good state, and he's like quite disillusioned with like middle class, his middle class, like middle-aged existence in the suburbs. And then Alex is the black sheep of the family who moved to London to pursue a career in the arts. And so she's probably the most similar to me. So she didn't really surprise me. So I think Kevin probably surprised me the most. Like because he's the most different from me. So I think when I write fiction, it's always more interesting to write the character who's like the farthest from my own life experience. Because like that's the creative aspect of it. You get to imagine what that life might be like, and you get to kind of empathize with someone who's very different from you. So even though Kevin, when you first read him, a lot of people like don't like him, and they said like I'm gonna punch Kevin like for most of the first book. Like the book goes on, and you kind of understand why he acts the way he does, and you understand like his different resentments and jealousies, and his general sort of insecurity. So I think for me that was the most interesting character to write because he was so different from me. And hopefully by the end of the book, like he's not as intolerable a person.
But I think you want those reactions from readers, when they meet a character and they have such a strong reaction to them, whether it's reaction of, oh my God, I love them, I want to be with them, or I really want to punch their lights out. I want them to go. Like you want them because it shows that you've done something, like you've created them fully formed. Like they're not just a stereotype of a cliche of a certain type of character.
Yeah, and I think the fun thing about writing like three different perspectives, so it's the three characters and then the novel constantly shifts perspective. So as we're moving along the road trip, we're seeing, you might see this city from like Alex's perspective and then this town from like Bonnie's perspective. So you're kind of always getting the other character's reaction. So if Kevin says something and then Alex gets pissed off, then we move to Alex's point of view and you see her reaction. So in some ways, the characters that we as readers might be really annoyed by, we then see like another character reflects that annoyance. So it was kind of fun to do that because then you could sort of have the different characters playing off each other, which I think happens in sibling relationships very much.
They do. Right. This is the second question I had because I've got your UK book and I'm looking behind you and you've got your US cover and your UK cover. So, and this is always a question that you'll always see on social media. It's so cool. But on social media, you'll always see someone asking like, well, how much involvement did you have in your covers? How much involvement did you have in the covers?
So the US cover was very involved. And I mean, it's quite funny and also like almost like a little bit shocking in some ways. Because I think my American publishers were like, okay, what were you thinking for your cover? And so I was like, I don't know. I was just thinking like maybe like something about the road trip. So like a silhouette of like figures in a car that implies a road trip. So I Googled silhouette figures, like silhouette road trip. And then that image came up. So I like sent that to my publishers. And I was like, I don't know, I was thinking something like this. And they were like, oh, okay, we'll just use that.
And it just used it.
We just used the image I found. I was like, have you checked the rights? And they're like, yeah, no, it's rights free. We can use that image. So
oh my God.
So then I couldn't really complain about not liking the cover.
No, because it's your choice.
So they fiddled with the fonts. They added some like stars because like stars are kind of a motif in the book. So that one I was pretty involved in that, like unexpectedly. And then the British cover, which I think a lot of people, I mean, some people do prefer the British cover, and it's warmer in kind of tone. That took a long time. Like I think the American, it's funny because publishers run on different time scales. So the book came out in early August. By September, October, the
Mm.
Americans had sorted their cover, and this cover didn't get sorted until like April. So it was like a very long delay. So it was,
Well,
yeah. Yeah, so I think they came up with the British publishers came up with different ideas, and I didn't really like them, and then eventually I kind of worked with them, and they kind of came up with that one. So yeah,
y-
you know,
yeah, 'cause the reason why I ask, 'cause I always see, especially with other authors, there's some authors like they have no involvement whatsoever. And the first they see it, they see their cover and then that's it. It's like that's what they're going with. And there are
yeah,
other authors who are really involved. So I'm just trying to think. My next book comes out in February.
yeah,
And I'm trying to think I don't think we started seeing the concepts until maybe May, I think.
yeah.
Which
Okay,
is
but
still
that's still pretty early.
that's
Like
actually
that's still,
that's probably quite good. That's
yeah,
probably quite good. It wasn't like it wasn't like yesterday. I
yeah,
suddenly got the cover, but I
yeah,
got the concepts, and the first couple of concepts we were like, no, I don't know what
yeah.
this is. It's
Yeah,
like go back.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's again like for a lot of authors, they don't think they can push back on it, or I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know, or some people just feel like this is going to be the cover, and you just have to accept it. And that's kind of happened to me once or twice for paperbacks, where my publishers were like, "Oh, we think that like for the complicit paperback in the UK, my publishers were like they really wanted to get it into supermarkets, so they said, "Oh, we really think like Tesco's been going to be quite responsive to this design, and like Tesco is really responding to like yellow on the cover, right?" So I kind of felt like I didn't have much of a choice there, and then Tesco ended up not picking it up anyway. So
It's
so yeah, so it's kind of, but like for the hardcover edition, which is like the first edition that people see in the
yeah,
world,
I like that one.
yeah, like I'm quite picky about it. Yeah, I think I like both of them. So
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a shock, I think, for authors, like new authors when they're just starting out and they realize how much influence the supermarkets have on
mm,
their covers. Because in the beginning, I just thought I didn't even think about it. I just thought, someone buys it, they say yes, we want it, and that's the end of it. But they really do have a say in what colors they think works on the jacket and fonts and all sorts of things.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's weird. I mean, have your books been in supermarkets?
Yeah.
And okay, okay, yeah, yeah. And I think because my books aren't like quite, they're not. This one particularly isn't like genre in a certain way. So supermarkets, it's always going to be like, is it romance? Is it crime? Or
Mm,
is it that kind of rare literary thing that takes off? So yeah, you feel like with supermarket, it is very much your book is very much a product, and the cover is going to appeal is designed specifically to appeal to like crime
yeah.
readers or romance readers. Yeah,
It probably will. I will go into my next question though, but it probably now makes sense why, especially when it comes to like romance books, they all have that similar cartoony animated color covers now
yeah,
because it sells.
yeah, yeah. I think you're freezing up a bit. So
Oh,
sorry.
did it
Did you?
freeze?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. So was there a question, or you were just commenting
No, it was just
on?
me. Yeah, it was just me just commenting.
Yeah,
It was just
yeah.
commenting
And I
on
think
the
that's
covers.
yeah, yeah. And I suppose for as an author who like doesn't strictly write in the genre, there's always like kind of a fear that if I write this, is it going to get slapped with a romance cover? I mean, I would probably never write anything that would get slapped with a romance
Yeah.
cover, but if I write this, is going to get slapped with like the big crime cover, even though it's not really crime. And I think like with my previous two books, that sort of was an issue, in that I wasn't actually writing those two books to be crime fiction
Mm,
in the traditional sense, but they were sold as crime,
yeah.
which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Those books were about crimes, and I used suspense in terms of the storytelling, but I was coming at the genre from a different angle. It wasn't just about pure entertainment. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think as an author, that's something I've always kind of not been sure about in terms of like how like I know the book I want to write, but it's more about like how our publisher is going to be positioning it within the
Mm.
market, and specifically in relation to genre. So yeah,
There's so many different aspects to it, like to the whole process. And sometimes all you want to do is just write the book. You don't
yeah,
want to be
yeah,
thinking about where it sits.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you just want to write the book that you want to write. And like actually with this
Yeah.
book, it was interesting because I deliberately wanted to write something that wasn't going to be sold as crime, but there is that mystery, and I do use suspense at
Mm,
different points throughout the novel. So there was that mystery about what happens in the previous road trip. So I think like the earliest version of this, like I wrote a prologue which was very crime. It was told from the point of view of like a local sheriff, right? And so like the three siblings had gotten arrested, right? So it was like, yeah, it was a local sheriff who just arrested these like Asian Americans, and, so it's like his point of view with them, right? So, but then it was like, well, what am I gonna do with the sheriff, right? It's like I don't actually have a whole thing with the sheriff. Like it's clearly a crime novel. So we just got rid of the whole show. We got rid of that whole like storyline, and then the past storyline about the previous road trip like didn't exist in the first version of the draft.
Yeah.
So the first version was very much just like me feeling my way around, and it could have gone in a much more crime direction, but like I specifically didn't want to do that. So yeah.
That poor sheriff, he's probably just waiting around now. He's waiting for you to find a story to put him in.
Yeah, I mean, I might put him in. I don't know. It was a bit of a stereotype myself because it was like, like sheriff in a small town in the US, in the West, right? It's like, I actually don't know any of these people. They're just like stereotypes that I've seen from TV shows. So, there is another thing about, if I'm writing that, I feel like, okay, I'm actually running into a stereotype here. So, yeah, which I deliberately don't want to do in my writing.
Okay. All right. So, Winnie, what's the most random fact you now know because of this book?
Oh God. Well, in Arizona, if you're going over 90 miles per hour, it's a different level of speeding ticket. So if you're less than so if like a police officer clocks you at like less than 90 miles per hour, like, it's the punishment isn't as severe as if you're going over 90 miles an hour. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have to make yourself aware? Because you're doing a road trip book, and obviously you're going through different states on Route 66.
Yeah.
Were you consciously thinking about the different rules, like different state laws, when you're writing your book, or you leave that to editing?
No. I mean, well, that shows up at a later stage. Obviously, in the first stage, you're just trying to figure out like the characters.
Yeah.
And their story. But yeah, at like towards the end drafts, the final drafts, I kind of was like, oh yeah, what is the policy for like carrying a gun in different states? Because that obviously varies. Like if you're driving across America, like some states are very strict, like what is it, like carry and display, or I don't know. There's like a term for like how you have your gun.
Conceal, is it conceal and carry in some states?
Conceal and carry, yeah. Like do you have to put it in a case, or are you allowed to? And so, and somebody coming from like Texas to another state that's like, has stricter laws in regards to guns might encounter that if they encounter a law enforcement official. So it's kind of like, that's all pretty minor stuff. It doesn't really affect like the major stuff that happens in the book, but like, you do want to be like kind of accurate in terms of how people are allowed to move their guns around or how quickly they can drive, but yeah, that is a weird thing about the States, that like you just cross a border and the rules change. So
whereas hey, literally you could drive from London, drive up to Newcastle, and there's no variation in laws at all. Whereas in the States that couldn't happen.
Yeah, and weirdly you can drive 60 miles per hour in like a lot of streets in like the UK, where I'm like 60 miles an hour. So yeah.
You can't do that here, right? Okay, so was this book harder or easier to write than Complicit, and why?
Probably harder, but I think like, what I find hard about writing books isn't so much like the creative process. It's about how to fit in the actual writing and the work alongside like my life, right? So I think this was harder because I actually had a child part way through Complicit. Like I wasn't done with Complicit, like I wrote like another draft or two of Complicit after I had my baby. But he was a newborn and it was COVID. So there was like lockdown and my partner was around. But like with this book, like my child was more active, need more entertainment. And we were living in a place where for a while I was the only driver, so like I would have to drive, so I'd have to figure out ways to like keep my child entertained and also get writing done with my partner not having like a driving license. So I'd have to like drive them to a local library where they could like do a library activity for an hour, and then I would like write in the library during that hour. So I think that was what I found tough, was trying to like figure out how to squeeze the work into like that sort of lifestyle. Yeah, I mean, my child's in school now, so essentially it would be easier. So I think that's harder. And then also in terms of the actual writing, like this was much looser. Like Complicit, like I knew what the story was going to be. Like I didn't have to do a huge amount of research because I had worked in the film industry. And so I wrote the book, and it didn't really, things didn't change that much throughout Complicit. It just like kind of got more refined. Whereas this book, it was the second in a 2-book deal. So on some level, I already knew I was going to get I had the publishing deal already. So that gave me a bit more freedom creatively, but it also meant like it was sort of a blank slate. Plus also then I had to, like, whatever I wrote had to get sort of vetted or approved by my editors, right? So I kind of wrote something that was much looser as a first draft. And, and then my editors changed partway through, right? So I was kind of, in some ways, like I wrote something that was like maybe 80% or 70% of the book and sent it to them. And then my editors changed. And then we came up with the idea of having the past storyline. So I threw out like 30,000 words I'd written. So it was kind of
What?
like,
Oh
yeah,
God.
yeah. And it wasn't, I didn't feel like it wasn't like I was killing my darlings. It was kind of like I read it and I'm like, this isn't working, right? And it wasn't
Yeah.
like a sense of despair. It was just more like, no,
It
okay,
doesn't work.
it's good enough. So I just need to like make it better. So, which is kind of, I guess, the whole process really. So, yeah, but like throwing out 30,000 words is like, other authors do it, right? Other authors write entire
I
books.
know, but that's like other authors, Winnie. That's
Yeah.
I just feel like that's you right now. That just feels like pain to think about throwing out 30,000 words. But you know the editor thing, when you, because I know a few authors who have switched editors, not by
Yeah,
choice. You know, their editors left for whatever reason,
yeah,
so they've
yeah,
got a new editor
definitely. Yeah,
whilst they're writing the book, and then when the book's being published, all of that.
yeah,
So how was that? Did it affect you in any way as an author,
yeah,
or
yeah,
just you just get
yeah.
on with it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like, of course it would. I mean, it didn't affect me so much. I mean, creatively, I've just got like different sets of notes, and I think like I had to kind of figure out what was going to work for me, right? And I
Mm,
think that's a lot of the work of being an author is like, even if you're not published, you're going to get feedback from a bunch of different sources, and
yeah.
that feedback might clash with each other. And one person might say this would be a really good idea, another person suggests something totally different. So I think for you as a writer, at whatever stage you're at, it's about trying to figure out like what of that you're going to take on board, and which of that resonates with your own creative vision, right? So I think for me, like, some editors said like, if we do this, then it's going to really take it into the crime and genre territory. If we do this, then it's going to swing it into more kind of melodramatic direction. So
Mm,
I kind of, some of it was about having to figure out like what is going to happen in this novel that works for me in terms of how it might be positioned market wise. Like I don't want it to, like, it's sort of being sold as a family drama, but it's not like roses and everything's wonderful, right? So I kind of, for me, it's about like, I guess a lot of it's about tone, right, and theme,
yeah.
and how you treat the book with the tone and theme that seem right for you, knowing that other editors might want to swing it in a certain direction and stuff. So, I think it was just more about the logistics and the operations of having editors change on you within a publishing house was like
Mm.
more disruptive than obviously having one throughout the whole process.
You know,
Yeah.
when you've been talking about where you place your book, and I'm going to turn around because have I got it? Yeah, Claire Leslie Hall, Broken Country,
Yeah.
her book, and that book, I feel it feels like there's different things. So you got the murder mystery
Mm.
subplot within there, then you got the romance, then you got kind of like dual timelines
Yeah.
things going on in there. And I was just trying to work out I don't think they ever marketed it as a crime book, like
No.
ever. I feel like it was just marketed as, I don't know, maybe just literary,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, but like a lot of books are just sold as kind of literary or
Yeah.
kind of, not even literary, like more like commercial, like upmarket commercials still use kind of dual timelines and like a mystery. So like, Crawdads, what's the Crawdads book? Where the Crawdads Sing.
Well, the quotes,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, there's actually a crime mystery kind of thread in the
Mm,
plot, right? And so the plot, it's structured sort of dual timeline. I don't think the crime mystery plot actually, doesn't work that well because I don't understand why she never testified in court case. She was accused of murder. I wasn't reading it for that. I was reading it for like the atmosphere and the characters, right? So
yeah.
in some ways, like the crime mystery plot is part of the book. It does kind of create the structure which you hang the story around, but it's not, tone wise, it's not about like suspense and grittiness, right? So I think for me, a lot of genre is about tone, right? And so
Mm,
this book is not, it's tonally quite different from Complicit and Dark
yeah.
Chapter. And that was a deliberate thing on my end because I was tired of writing like dark stuff. But then also I still use kind of the mystery and the dual timeline to
Yeah.
kind of structure the book. Yeah.
Okay, so without giving away any spoilers, did the book end the way you originally planned, or did it surprise you?
Yes and no. I mean, so if you look at road trip narratives, they're pretty straightforward, right? Like people are driving from like point A to point B, and like usually either they reach point B or they don't. Usually they do, right? And so I used a lot of road trip movies when I was kind of planning this book, like just like so I watched. So the main ones for me were like Rain Man and Little Miss Sunshine, right? Because those are both like kind
Yeah.
of fractured families have to go on a road trip, right? And so if you look at 3-act structure, because I use 3-act structure a lot when I write novels, it's very like the road trip is really easy because it's like act 1 is before the trip, act 2 is the
Yeah,
road
who's
trip,
the trip?
and act 3 is when they
Please
get there,
after
right?
the trip.
So for me, that's pretty much what happens here, right? So act 1 is like leading up to the trip, act 2 is the trip itself, act 3 is California when they see their parents. So I kind of always knew like, okay, I mean, there's a version where they'd never make it to California, but that's again a different genre, right? So I think,
Yeah.
I always knew they were going to get to California, they were going to see their parents, and and they're in, for me, there's a lot of kind of like quite personal themes in there. It's about living far from your parents, like thousands of miles away from your parents who are getting older, and not being able to see them, and not actually knowing what your parents like life was like before they had you, right? So it's kind of about geographic and emotional distances. So they reach California, they see their parents who obviously are much older than when they grew up as kids, and so there's all that kind of confrontation of emotion there. But in order for them to reach that stage, they need to have like sorted out their own issues as siblings, like
Yeah.
on the road. So I kind of knew that was where we're heading. We're always heading to California because that's how Route 66 ends. But it was about kind of just the different ways in which the siblings kind of dealt with their issues I hadn't figured out, and that got worked out as I was writing it. So yeah, but even just the kind of details of how, for example, Alex and Kevin have a very fraught kind of relationship at the beginning. The details of how that gets worked out, I didn't really know until I started writing it, and a lot of it didn't get worked
No.
out until like the final stages of the drafts. Yeah.
I should know this, right? This is
Mhm.
geography, but where does Route 66 start? Because I know where it ends.
Starts in Chicago. Do you know where
Oh,
it
see.
ends in California?
Yeah, I don't know where. I know it ends in California, but where exactly does it end in California?
Santa Monica Pier. Yeah.
See, I never knew
So
that.
yeah, so we go to Santa Monica Pier. Like a lot of stuff is Route 66 themed. Like so, the day the book came out in the US, I went to Santa Monica Pier like with my toddler and my really good friend, and we rode like the Route 66 themed roller coaster in Santa Monica Pier. Took photos, which I have on Instagram. I got to do another
Yeah.
reel of that, of like us at the end of Route 66 sign on Santa Monica Pier. But it starts in like the middle of Chicago. So it goes Chicago, Illinois, Missouri, like a tiny corner of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. So it's and like America changes a lot during that
Yeah.
journey, right? You go through like the middle of Chicago, like skyscrapers, to like cornfields to the Midwest. Then things open out in like Oklahoma. There's like ghost towns. It's like flat as a pancake in Texas, and then you get the kind of red rock desert of the Southwest. It's kind of, you realize in some ways it's a very beautiful country. It's a really diverse country, and also you're going through parts of America that might seem really foreign to you if you're from the UK, or
Yeah.
if you're from like me, like if you're from the East Coast, right, and live in the UK.
Right. It is so not like a book question. I suppose it is kind of related to your writing and how you are to writing. But living in the UK and seeing
Mm,
what's going on
yeah,
in the States, like
yeah.
how does it make you feel like personally? But then also how does that influence how you write now? Or has it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one reason I wrote the book, because I wrote it in 20. Well, I did the research in 2021, and so I was writing it mainly before Trump got reelected, right? And so
Yeah.
then there's like two references to Trump in the book, and so I was writing at a time where like I actually didn't know Trump was going to get reelected, right? And like, but actually, if anything, you realize that like, okay, these divisions in American society like persist, and they're pretty
Mm.
deeply ingrained, and with Charlie Kirk's assassination, with everything that's happening, it's like that polarization is like getting deeper and deeper. So I think I wanted to write the book to kind of address some of that, and like, so you see that in the siblings' relationship. So so Kevin, voted for Trump and he owns guns. And Alex is like a complete lefty, like Black Lives Matter, it's like LGBT, like rights, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like she's really invested in like these kind of like these left-wing campaigns. And so she and Kevin just clash like that. So I kind of wanted to encapsulate those divisions in American society in these siblings and try to figure out, like, at least in the case of the siblings, like, can they get past that? At the end of the day, they grew up in the same family and they should be really close to each other. So how did that happen, right? And is there any chance for them to reconcile? And I suppose it's meant to be a metaphor for America, right? Like, we're all technically in the same country, Americans that live there. So how did these kinds of divisions happen? Yeah. And what is your relationship to America based on where you sit within that spectrum, that political spectrum? Yeah. But it's nuts. It's nuts what's happening in America. But like,
I mean, that's all you got. Sometimes you're like, it's just nuts.
Yeah. And also the other thing is like the America's history. So that's what I was trying to address, because it's okay. They're driving Route 66, and our image of Route 66 is like diners and like 1950s motor lodges and neon, and like that is very much like the image that Route 66 projects. But you're also going through country that was like stolen from the Native Americans. They visit Tulsa. There was like a huge racialized massacre in Tulsa when the Black community was attacked in 1920. So I kind of wanted to address like American history as they're going through these parts of America, and they're kind of encountering different communities and different kind of pockets of American demographics that are different from the image of the American West that's kind of sold to us, right? So it's also about trying to address those aspects of American history and those kinds of injustices that have always been there and are kind of pretty much still there and still fuel the kinds of divisions that exist today. Yeah.
Okay. So did you ever hit the wall when you was writing this book, and how did you get past it?
Yeah, I mean, when I threw out 30,000 words, I was like, oh my God. Like, there was a sense of like, God.
I would have cried. I would have just collapsed.
Yeah. But it was like also just a sense of like, okay, the 30,000 words like they're not working, right? So I think when I call it hitting the wall, I think that's just like writing a novel, right? It's just knowing. Yeah. In some novels, you maybe have a really clear idea of what you're going to do, and other novels are more exploratory. And so this one was more exploratory. I guess, I know. So I guess what like kept me going was like, it was really about the 3 sibling relationships. Oh yeah. Cause in the early version of the novel, so Alex she's married to a Black British woman, and she hasn't told her parents. Right. And so, or her family, right? So that's her secret at the start of the novel. And like the characters all have sort of their own secrets that they've been keeping from their siblings. So, and her wife is expecting a child. So Alex like,
oh my God, that's like, you can't get any more.
Yeah. So, well, so basically like she's very kind of like living a London life, and then like being very diverse about things and her lifestyle choices. And she's an artist, and so Kevin just doesn't get that, right? And he's always like, why can't you just be like a normal adult and like get a job, like why are you in your 40s already, have like kids and you're not married, right? And she just hasn't told them.
She hasn't told them, yeah,
because she's in a same-sex relationship. But yeah, I think for me it was really about just kind of, so in the early version, her wife comes along on the trip as well, right? So Naya, her Black British wife who's heavily pregnant, comes along on the trip, and then we just decide like, actually, as cool a character as she is, it needs to be just the siblings, right? Because like we all act differently from our. If it's just you and your siblings, you act in a certain way. If it's your siblings and everybody's got their spouses or partners with them,
you act differently.
Different, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it was like, okay, actually the nub of this book is like that 3-way kind of relationship between the siblings, and it needs to be just about that. So that's kind of sort of what kept me going in terms of just like boiling it down more and more to the sibling relationships. Yeah. But it was exploratory, but I got there in the end. So
you know what? I think that's the new word for everyone, for writers, just to use. I'm exploring. When you hit the wall, I haven't hit a wall. I'm just exploring. I'm just going to see where it goes.
Explore the 30,000 words that just don't work.
Explore 30,000 words in the bin. Go on, I'm getting palpitations. Right. So Winnie, what are you working on next?
Well, so I've just started as an assistant professor in creative writing at the University of Birmingham. So I literally just induced or inducted. I don't know what the word is. It was like the induction first years. Induced. 81st years. Yeah, anyway, so what I've been doing recently, or what I'm doing at the moment, is like teaching creative writing. I know what my next book is going to be. I've written like half a chapter of it. That was like an end of a 2 book deal. So like it also like probably, who knows what's going to happen for me publisher wise, but I've got yeah, I like the next idea. It's just, and for me it was like this. So what we left unsaid, complicit, and dark chapter, and that's like the reverse order of like this kind of loosely linked trilogy for me. Dark chapter is very much about my own experience of sexual violence. Complicit was about kind of those issues, but within a film industry, like workplace context.
Yeah.
And what we left unsaid isn't really about that, but it is about kind of gendered and racialized forms of aggression and violence that we might encounter when we're traveling, and how that can impact our families. So like that's kind of a loose trilogy for me thematically, and also personally, it's about me kind of creating more distance between myself and my own trauma. So I kind of want to do something new for my next book. That doesn't really deal so much with that in the same way. Yeah, so it's the idea I'm working on is set in the world of science fiction and fantasy fandom. So it's not sci-fi. The book
I'm
itself.
not surprised. In my head, I was thinking, I don't know. You was talking, I just thought, I bet she's going to write something fantasy. Maybe it's my psychic ability.
But it's not fantasy. It's not fantasy, but set in the world of fans, the SFF fans, right? Because I've just noticed, I mean, there's, you might be one. I watch Game of Thrones. Right? There's like a lot of people out there for whom
there are a lot, and the fandoms are a lot.
Yeah, and for me, I'm just fascinated by how like passionate people are, and how much like time they spend in these worlds which don't exist, right? Yeah, and just like, so what is that saying about like our society, that people would rather spend time like in Westeros, or like or whatever, than like hanging out with their kid, right? Or whatever.
Well, I've been to Comic-Con a few times, and the extent of my contribution in terms of costume is that it might be a t-shirt. So one year I had my Flash t-shirt, the other time it might have been a Joker t-shirt. That's the extent of my getting dressed up, my cosplaying. But you see the amount of work that these people who go along to Comic-Cons, that they put into their costumes, how much they're invested in it. And it's not just, one alone, it's their whole group of friends. And that is I say that it takes up their life. It's like, it's not like a once every, twice a year sort of thing. It's something they're constantly doing and thinking about.
Yeah. So it's the fact that so much of their identity is rooted in this particular franchise or something, and you're like, well, I mean, in some ways, it's from the point of view of the creators, right? The movie studios or whatever, like comic book studios, like that's amazing, right?
Happy days.
All that product, but like for you as a fan, it's like, okay, that's cool that there's so much joy that is derived from that product, but then at the same time, it's like, but why, right? Like, why is it so important for people, right? But I'm not judging it. It's just, for me, it's just fascinating that it means that much to people. Yeah, and like this didn't exist like 50 years ago, or like 60 years the same way.
Not even when I was growing up. It seems to me that whole cosplaying thing has been maybe the last. I could be wrong. In my head, I'm thinking like in the last like 20 years, it's been this thing that's been growing and growing and growing to where it is now. Right. So I have two listener questions from you, and I just need to say to the listeners, like, thank you so much for like actually sending me questions. I appreciate it, because sometimes you don't know, and then the question lands in your DM. You're like, thank you. So first is from James, and he asked, well, he said, your books, I can't even see, your books tackle different and often sensitive themes. How do you look after yourself emotionally when you're working on such intense material?
Yeah, so I think that's a tough thing. I mean, self-care is a term that people tend to use. So like this book wasn't so intense, because I was deliberately trying to like write something tonally lighter. But Dark Chapter, I didn't really practice self-care, right? And like, so I would write whole passages and then just feel like terrible after, because I just reminded myself of worst period of my life, and I was recovering from my rape. I didn't do that well for Dark Chapter, but like, I think what I often tell other writers or students is that, if you're writing about sensitive subject matter that is like particularly sensitive for you in terms of your own lived experience, then just like be aware of that and kind of do it in small doses, right? So just tell yourself like, okay, I know I'm going to write this chapter now, it's a particularly heavy chapter, so I'm going to give myself like a half hour or an hour to write it, and then plan what you're gonna do afterwards, and like after that I'm gonna go for a walk, or after that I'm gonna see a friend, and so make that appointment with a friend afterwards, or like after that I'm gonna watch an episode of this thing that brings me joy, right? So kind of like learn to like know in advance what might make you upset, and then kind of plan something after that's going to make you feel better, right? And then also do it in small doses and chunks. Yeah, so that's a general rule, I guess, for self-care as a writer.
And the next question from Aisha is, what advice, and it kind of ties into the fact that you've just, you did your induction with the first years, the freshers at uni, the creative writing students. So what advice would you give to writers who are just starting out and might be nervous about telling stories that are very close to their own lives?
Well, the good thing about writing is like you can do whatever you want as a writer, right? You're kind of like the grandmaster, right? So like you could write a story that is very close to your life, but not write it as memoir, and not write it in a way where it's like, this is my life. You can write it as fiction, right? And so you can make up a fictional character, you can change details of that fictional character, who maybe has shared elements of your life, but also is different in certain ways. And so there's a certain amount of like power, and I don't want to use the word control, but like power or mastery that you have over that whole situation in terms of how you want to position it. You can write it in future tense, you can write it in past tense, you can write it from like the point of view of like a really minor character, which provides an insight or might make an interesting creative approach to a difficult topic, right? So, and especially with difficult topics or personal topics, you can chop things up and do it in fragments, right? So there's like a whole different range of approaches that you can use to sort of distance yourself from something that's very like personally important, and maybe you want that distance and maybe you don't, right? But yeah, it's kind of and you also can stop writing it if you don't feel like doing it, and return to it like a month later or a year later. So there's no one saying that you have to write this, and so the decision to write about it generally comes from like a deeply ingrained personal need, but it's also knowing that you can move things around and change things to make yourself more comfortable with the writing of it.
Okay, so what message or feeling do you hope readers take away from What We Left Unsaid?
I guess our sibling relationships are pretty special. And a lot of people, like, even if they don't get on well with their siblings, will say like, yeah, it's special because nobody can wind me up like my brother, right? So but they're also very unique because there's the people that know us best for the first 20 years of our lives, aside from our parents. Well, actually probably more so than our parents will be our siblings. And I just kind of thought it was sad that like oftentimes that those relationships kind of drift in our adult lives, right? So if you live far from your siblings and they're married and they have kids, and and like people end up doing their different things, so that really potentially close relationship is often kind of just dissolved, or kind of made more estranged. So that those can be special relationships, and probably many of them like are probably worth still resuscitating or saving those kinds of relationships. Some of them aren't, right? Some people just have bad relationships with their siblings. But yeah, just that is not something to be like, I guess, maybe it could be treasured in a certain way, those kinds of sibling relationships. And the other thing is that travel is cool, right? So like, I guess
oh god, travel's the best.
Siblings, out of their malaise is traveling, but also kind of putting yourself in a different place where you're out of your comfort zone, like gives you a different perspective on things. So, and that's why I love traveling, and that's kind of what I was trying to do with the road trip story. Yeah.
Okay, so Winnie, finally, to end our coffee break, which book, film, show, or video game do you recommend?
Well, I guess we were just talking about like franchises. So this isn't a franchise. Maybe that's why I recommend it. So I mean, it's like Dark on Netflix. German like time travel, like
no, I've never heard of it.
Oh my god, it's so good, right? So it's 3 seasons. Third season, not so much a fan of, but like seasons 1 and 2, it's like it starts out as a kind of mystery in a small town in Germany, and a child goes missing, right? So and there's police officers and stuff. So like it starts off just as crime, and then you realize, wait, there's a time travel element, right? But then it's like different families within the same town, but like from different time periods, and the characters like moved across time periods and stuff. And the casting is brilliant because you'll see one character at a young age, another character, the same character middle age, and the actors look so much alike. And it's really poignant. And like, so there's kind of like star-crossed lovers elements in there. There's like parents who lost their children in there, but they've just moved into a different time period. Yeah, and it's, I mean, some people have watched it and they're like, it drove them crazy because they're trying to like connect all these different things. And like for me, I was just like, this is kind of genius the way they did it. So yeah, the first two seasons are brilliant. The third season, I'm not so sure about, but it still ends really well. And
Yeah.
yeah, and like, and tonally, it's really interesting as well. It's kind of got that dark, haunting, like small town thing, but it's got like it's got like family themes as well. So yeah, dark
I
on
mean,
Netflix.
the only reason I started laughing is because your enthusiasm was like, you need to watch it. This is so
Yeah.
good. Like, how have you not watched it?
Yeah, I never even heard of it, but yeah, I mean, I know. So everyone I know, most people I know who've seen it are like, it's brilliant. Some people are like, it's too complicated for me, but
Yeah.
it's kind of genius the way they wrote it. Like, I don't even know how they came up with writing the scripts and coming up with these like storylines that kind of cross generations and stuff. So yeah,
I'm
big
going to look
fan.
out for it. I'm going to look
Yeah, and
out
it's
for
also
it.
a franchise. They're not going to do like more or have spin-offs, so you kind of have to
Yeah.
respect that they just ended it like that. So yeah.
I will look out for it. And that just leaves me, Winnie M Li, to say thank you so much for joining me for our coffee break.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks, Nadine, for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for joining me for a coffee break. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. And remember, you can also listen to the Conversation Coffee Break and the OG, the Conversation Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to be a guest, send me an email at theconversation@nadinemattheson.com. Thank you for spending your break with me. See you next time.